evening. My name is Barkha Dutt. You're watching The Mojo Story, the digital platform that does an in-depth analysis of one big issue every day. Today, India finally has approvals for a third vaccine, the Sputnik, in about time too. But where is the vaccine for common sense? As governments, both states and center, lecture the citizens of our country to show COVID-appropriate behavior, take a look at this. These are the pictures that have come from the Shahi Snaan in Haridwar leading up to the Kumbh Mela. Hundreds of thousands of people marking that holy event on the Hindu calendar, even as concerns and anxieties are mounting about India's second wave, one seen to be much more transmittable, galloping rapidly so that Mumbai and Delhi's hospitals, cremation grounds and graveyards are already overrun. Now, this is one set of religious rituals, and there are many others. There have been many others in the lead up. And then, of course, there is the political ritual. We've all seen the pictures that have been coming out of Bengal. The Prime Minister is there today. Let's play some of those pictures for you. And remember, this is across parties, whether it is Mamata Banerjee or Narendra Modi. If you take a look at the kind of election pictures that we've been seeing from West Bengal, that's Mamata Banerjee, but the Prime Minister is also there today. Amit Shah has also been there. Rahul Gandhi is also there. This doesn't exempt any particular party at all. So why are we not seeing parties come together and suspend physical campaigning when they're so quick to lecture the citizens? On the program today, we are going to be looking at the hypocrisy and some of the idiocy, the self-destructive idiocy that India is embracing, when on the other hand, it's talking about destructive lockdowns that only ravage the economy and punish ordinary citizens. Let me introduce our experts on the program one by one today, voices from different sides of the spectrum, as well as the medical spectrum, of course. Let me introduce first on the program, Dr. Rakesh Pandey, who's a professor at Delhi University. Welcome to the program. Sandip Ghose, columnist and commentator, is with us, as is Sumanth Raman, well-known columnist and political analyst. Shahid Siddiqui, editor of Nai Dunya, is with us. And finally, Dr. Rakesh Parikh, who must be, Rajesh Parikh, I beg your pardon, Dr. Rajesh Parikh of Just Lok Hospital, who must be just alarmed at all of these mass congregations, whether religious or political. They just simply do not make any sense. So before I get into the politics of it, the hypocrisy of it, I'll get the doctor's opinion. Dr. Parikh, there can be two opinions on lockdowns. You know, you and I have had these debates. I'm ferociously against them. I'm no doctor, but I've committed pretty much a year of my life on the ground covering these. And you know, on the one hand, when you see individual citizens being fined for masks, you see police penalizing poor people for going out in what's known as curfew hours, and then you see these mass congregations, you simply feel so enraged. But from a doctor's perspective, what is this doing, these mass images, these mass congregations, to India's battle against COVID?
Well, Barkha, I can only echo your sentiments and say to you that I am appalled. I'm also alarmed, even by your own standards, where you mince no words. You began with a sense of horror. I've seldom encountered that you speak. Yeah. And what has happened, as you said, there is talk of COVID-appropriate behavior, but there is no COVID-appropriate attitude. There is a chasm between attitude and behavior. If the attitude were to change, then none of these images that you showed us would be there today. And what we are seeing is a situation in which political rhetoric is outweighing scientific data. Strident voices are louder than scientific reason. It's almost as if the opening words of A Tale of Two Cities, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It's been good in the sense that science has progressed so rapidly in this past year, and vaccine development is just one aspect of it. And in scientific terms, yes, we're doing great. But in common sense terms, we're doing as bad as society did during the plague, Middle Ages. as bad, if not worse, as we did 100 years ago during the influenza pandemic. And I sometimes wonder how generations to come will look upon us and our appalling behavior, and whether these really may finally turn out to be the Middle Ages when it comes to reason.
Those are strong words, Dr. Parikh, the Middle Ages when it comes to reason. And the point is that how are you going to get citizens to wear masks when none of our politicians are? How are you going to get people to avoid going to a restaurant to have dinner when they see hundreds of thousands of people gathered at any religious ritual? I don't care whether it's the Tabli Jamaat or it's what's happening in Haridwar, whether it's the Sikhs or it's mass over Easter. All of it has the same medical consequence. COVID-19 is religion agnostic, is political party agnostic. When are we going to understand that, Dr. Parikh, before I open it up?
These are rhetorical questions, Barkha. There are no easy answers. I just hope and pray that it happens sooner than later. In an earlier conversation, I had mentioned to you that it seems as though the virus has turned the microscope on us and has exposed the cracks which existed within our society. Those cracks and the new legs appear like huge chasms. And unless we learn to repair all these cracks in our system as quickly as possible, the virus is eventually going to engulf us all. I've been talking about the second wave, as you know, for well over a year. I wrote about it in a policy paper. I wrote mid-December, more or less predicting the onset of the second wave and its intensity as well. And we wrote about it again in January in our vaccination book. So it's about time that we paid heed to science and not let the soft voice of science be drowned out by the loud voice of politics.
That's, I think, sums up everything. Not let the soft voice of science be drowned out by the loud voice of politics. I just want to bring at this point Shahid Siddiqui in. And now, Shahid, I remember through 2020 when we saw the Tabli Jamaat congregation take place, many of us were unequivocal in how we condemned it. You, me, all of us, and those are the pictures out of the Nizamuddin area, where not too far, Shahid, from where you live, where the headquarters of the Tablighi Jamaat are. And, the fact is that they were rightly condemned. Some of them were even criminalized. But now we see this congregation, even advertisements for the Kumbh taking place. There is no announcement that the Kumbh should be called off. And you're seeing, the double standards of it all. And like I said, I don't care whether it's Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism, Christianity. I care about protecting lives. I'm anti a lockdown. And, I think the hypocrisy of it, I think Shahid's just rejoining us. Sandip, do you want to take that? Because, there was so much talk about the Tablighi Jamaat. We're just not seeing the same kind of talk about the Kumbh Mela, about the Shahi Snaan that we've seen take place in Haridwar. Shahid's here. Shahid, you want to just jump in and then I'll take that to Sandip?
Should I come in?
Yes.
Barkha, what happened in March 2020 was unfortunate. But after that, the attitude of the whole nation, the attitude of the media, the attitude of the government, the attitude of the police, the way they came down on a community for a small mistake, and I condemned it at that time, but it was a small mistake because they were not prepared for the lockdown. Suddenly lockdown was announced. The Tablighi Jamaat people didn't know where to go, so they stayed inside the markers. But they were few hundred. They had no option but to stay inside. But after that, the attitude of the whole system against them, the way they were arrested, the way they were demonized, and the way every one of us, even a poor man, a street vendor, a shopkeeper, anybody with a skull cap or a beard, or even people like us going out for some reason were demonized. If I mention anywhere that I stay in Nizamuddin, I was looked with horror by the people around me. So that was the situation. And today, that was wrong. This is also wrong. what is happening today, we are not becoming reasonable with the kind of situation we are in, the whole society is in. We have to be scientific, we have to be reasonable, we have to be rational, and we have to be secular. This COVID should have made us more secular than what we were, but that's not happening. It should have made us more rational, but it's not happening. And I hold more than the religious people, our political leaders responsible for that, because political leaders have allowed they could come down on the way they came down in March 2020. They could at least say now that we will not allow any religious congregation. They could have not gone for campaigning on the ground. The election commission is equally responsible. How did election commission allow this kind of campaigning in 8 phases in all these states? So it is not just the people who are irresponsible. When the leaders are irresponsible, when the prime minister and the home minister is going without a mask, then what will be the impact and how will people behave? But at the same time, I saw a picture where, in a restaurant when people were eating after 10 o'clock. Poor people, very poor people. They were beaten up and thrown out by the police because they were eating after 10 o'clock. Now, these poor working people, if they're eating after 10 o'clock, I mean, where would they go? So we are becoming inhuman with this pandemic, unfortunately.
Yeah, I actually have to say that I agree with you, because the logical thing to do should be to put a stop to mass congregations and not, in fact, encourage lockdowns that become curfews that give an opportunity for the police to actually penalize those who live on the margins, our poorest people. Sandip, if you want to come in here, the hypocrisy, I called it the hypocrisy, the banality, and the idiocy, because it is just nothing short of idiocy. We all know that lockdowns don't work. Lockdowns were only meant to give breathers to hospital systems. Dr. Parikh may have a different view, but well, this is now an emerging view in this country, and we'll get his view on that. But lockdowns also punish the poorest people. But when the powerful are campaigning across parties in your home state of Bengal, across parties, right? We can't even have a political consensus. We can't even have the election commission jump in. And you are going to see sort of Indian Muslims get up and say the way we were vilified, the way we were judged, other religious communities, those at the Shahi Snaan, those on the banks of the Haridwar, are not being judged in the same way. And today I saw the corollary. I saw people on the right wing saying liberals are not judging the farmers' protests in the same way. It's a no-brainer. All mass congregations must be paused at this moment. Political, religious, social, it doesn't matter what, it's common sense. Sandip, unmute yourself, please, and go ahead.
So, Barkha, first let me say the politically correct things before I take on my contrarian self, which you keep commenting. Okay, the first thing, I totally agree with you. I think just now, both the Shahi Snaan as well as the political campaigning need to stop. Political campaigning in Bengal, it's more than halfway over. And I don't think it's really going to make huge differences in fortunes of any party if the physical campaigning with these large congregations are curtailed now, and the election commission needs to take a call, and it's something which people can't shy away from. Equally, Shahi Snaan is over in Haridwar, and there I think also it can be, but it can also, both these things, especially the Shahi Snaan, can happen only if the political people take a call. It has to be a political appeal, and the kind of emotional appeal which Narendra Modi is known to make, which cuts with a lot of people. He has that sort of credibility or respect. And I think it needs to come something from his level to make people understand that there are.
So why is it not happening? Why is it not happening?
No, I think it has to be that there has to be a public pressure built in, or the opinion pressure, which some of it, in a very small way, we are doing it here. Yeah. And that's why I'm very unequivocal to say right at the beginning that is so. Now, thereafter, I think the point which we need to come into is the practicality of this whole, because I'm more concerned not just about a Shahi Snaan and what's happening in Bengal, but about the whole, dimensions of this pandemic, the second wave of this pandemic. I tweeted earlier, one of my biggest worry is, especially the Shahi Snaan and the first wave, somehow our villages were to some extent insulated, and I think largely due to their own consciousness, awareness, There was a lot of vigilantism at the rural level even when migrant workers came back. I know firsthand, villagers were exercising caution, not letting them come in if they showed any symptoms, etc. But my worry is this sort of a Shahi Snaan kind of event when these people go back while state governments are preparing to receive the migrant workers coming back again. How will this spread in the villages? So these are very, very serious
I mean,
consequences.
migrant workers were placed in quarantine centers for 14 days. I personally reported this before they were allowed back into their communities. That is not going to happen with
That's
these
precisely.
pilgrims at the banks of the Haridwar. Worse, we have seen advertisements, Sandeep, from state governments on the Kumbh,
Okay,
right?
I'll
And
come
it's
there.
again
Yeah.
become some Hindu-Muslim issue.
The Hindu
How
Muslim
are we?
apart,
How do we make everything a Hindu-Muslim
no,
issue in this
I have a
country?
comment on that. I'll come back to
Yes.
this. You see, the
Yeah.
point is, last year when it started, the COVID thing, we all talked about a new normal setting in. New normal became almost a cliche, and everybody said it's there. I think the biggest mistake in every walk of life, Barkha, whether it's in public, whether it's in business, everywhere, we all got into this Hindu, not Hindu, the Indian psyche. ठीक है चले जाएंगे उसके बाद everything will have to come back to square one. This is something which will, so you see this whole element, people have tried to get back into normal everywhere. And if we are honest with ourselves, what the kind of precautions we were exercising last year at this time, even at home, today we are not doing it. And I think that has been a fatal mistake, because we have to really recognize things are not going to get normal. It's not something which is go away with a vaccine or not, and nobody can predict. Tomorrow, 3 months down the line, Dr. Parikh will tell us, we knew this vaccine is not going to work beyond 6 months. Some new strain will come and we should have done. So we have to recalibrate that. And therefore, what I'm coming to, business back to usual, just like companies and corporates have gone back saying that we cannot be going remote working forever. People have to come back to office. At the end of the day, Barkha admitted, the Kumbh as well as the political rallies are also business for some people. Okay, it's the politicians' business. They cannot keep it in suspense for more than a year.
Yeah.
They think that we have to get back to business. So do the religion part
But
of
do you
it.
think? Do you think it's fair that the Tabli Jamaat was used? And I agree with Shahid. What they did was completely irresponsible.
No, I totally agree.
But you're not seeing anybody who's flocking to Haridwar being judged in the same way, and you're not seeing state governments even. At this moment, the UP government must step in and call off this Kumbh Mela. It must call off the Kumbh Mela, isn't it a no-brainer?
Yeah, it's an Uttaranchal thing. They have to do it.
I'm sorry, Uttarakhand. I'm sorry, Uttarakhand. I beg your pardon. And instead you have the chief minister saying that faith will protect people against COVID.
No, I totally agree. There is no debate on that. That's a no-brainer. I'm not trying to at all justify it. But I'm therefore saying, why I would differentiate between the Tablighi Jamaat and this thing happening today. Because even if you see in our own life, how we were, the kind of precautions we were exercising, or as we say, even if we saw people without masks or our help coming in, we were at a different level of strictness and, tolerance we had then. Today it has relaxed. And today, therefore, a different set of standards are coming. So that could have happened after 12 months of living with it. So I'm not getting into that aspect of going back to Tablighi Jamaat and comparing this, or somebody, as you said, compared the farmers' protest with this, etc. I think that's all history. Let's put them aside. But we have to, as a nation, as a community, get to deciding our norms and how we are, because every day is going to be a surprise. Like I was in a business conference before this, and I was telling them, we have to be in a situation when we have to be prepared to get up every morning for a new surprise. And that's how
Let me get Shahid in briefly, and then I'll come to you, Sumanth. I think one of the points that Sandip is making is that the Tablighi Jamaat congregation happened very early in the pandemic. There was a lot of panic at that time. There was a lot of paranoia. And since then, we have seen India relaxing many of its restrictions, so you can't really compare it. But you've also had the Chief Minister of Uttarakhand basically saying that faith will protect people. I mean, these are just unscientific things, as Dr. Parikh has been saying. And nobody is condemning him in the same way as, God forbid, had he been from any other faith. Shahid.
Yeah, Barkha, I agree. I agree that today we are in a different situation. My problem is not with the society as much as with the government. Because immediately after what happened after March 2020, it was not just the Tabli Jamaat people, lot of others were arrested, the criminal charges were put against them.
Shahid, we can't hear you. Shahid, we can't hear you.
Of the government, the attitude of the police, the attitude of the system is extremely very, very different. I mean, if there was slight difference, I would have said yes, because of the attitude, because of the time things have changed. But now what I see is that the whole attitude is so different. The media is not going out and asking the question why the Chief Minister of Uttarakhand is saying this. Most of the media is not saying that. While we, including me, we attacked and we condemned the Amir of the Jamaat, Tablighi Jamaat. We totally condemn him. Nobody is condemning any of these sadhus who are, many of them are positive. And still they are going in and saying it's because of the religion. I mean, already I have started asking that there will be Ramzan in a week's time. And we have asked Muslims, we are asking Muslims that please, for God's sake, don't congregate even for namaz, even 50 people, let not be there, because we know that we will be targeted. We were supposed to have a function about 4 days back in India Islamic Center, Indian Muslims for Progress and Reforms. We have formed for bringing reforms in the community. But we decided not to have the function. Everything was ready. We decided not to have the function because everybody said that if you have the function, you will be held responsible for what is happening today. You will be targeted even if you, and we had decided only 50 people will be coming to the program. But even then, we were afraid. We were afraid that we will be targeted if we hold even a small function of 50 people in the India Islamic Center for the reform movement and for progress. So that is the situation. We can see the different attitude of everybody, including the media, including the even rational people with one community and the other community. And that is what makes us very, very sad. It makes us very, very sad.
It is sad because surely we should only be talking about science. Only science. Science should be the only barometer right now. Sumanth and Professor Pandey, I want to briefly get both of you. And Sumanth, go ahead.
Unmute. Yeah. Okay. Barkha, first of all, I look at this entirely differently. I see this as a manifestation essentially of how far we have fallen, the level of decay in our society. Look, this is not just an issue where the government has mishandled things. It is not a question of one or two people at the top of government making huge mistakes in the way they've handled the entire COVID crisis till date. It is a question of an entire system that has either actively colluded or done nothing. The Election Commission is a classic example. I mean, here in Tamil Nadu, we went to the polls on 6th of April. Before that, huge rallies, thousands of people without masks. So many of us pointed this out to the Election Commission and said, look, you should be enforcing something. They did nothing. Okay. Now, forget about the Election Commission. Then go to the courts. Suo motu cognizance is taken of some comment made by somebody, right? And contempt proceedings are instituted. This is a huge public health disaster waiting to happen. And it's already unraveling. And nothing is being done. Neither the courts, nor the Election Commission, nor the senior bureaucracy. Nobody has actually stood up and said, this is wrong. Let us now take the Kumbh in Haridwar. Let us assume that this was not a Kumbh, but it was, let us say, an Islamic gathering or a Christian gathering. Do you think that just because last year we were more sensitive, this year we are less sensitive, things would have just been the way they are now and nobody would have condemned? Social media would have gone berserk. There would have been calls. There would have been people who were petitioning the courts to stop this the festival. And look, at the end of the day, the sad fact is nobody in government or in any of the organizations that should have stopped this or attempted to stop this have even so much have spoken up. That to me is the biggest tragedy of this whole thing. It's not whether it is Kumbh or Tablighi or any other religion. It is the fact that from the top, to the bottom, hardly anybody in a position to change this has actually stood up for what they should have. And that is the biggest tragedy of
this.
this.
I think every single institution, the courts, the election commission, the politicians, anybody could have made the intervention right now. The Supreme Court can take suo motu notice and just stop all of these rallies or mandate the fact that without masks, they're not allowed. I just do not understand. Dr. Parikh, before I come to you, Professor Pandey, I do not understand. On the one hand, we want people to give up their everyday lives. We have token gestures like night curfews and weekend lockdowns, which are really about the liberties of individual citizens who are not necessarily gathering in huge numbers. Even if I want to come and have dinner with you and both of us are vaccinated and we're sitting with masks in each other's house, we can't do that. But hundreds of thousands of people can gather at election rallies. Children should take board exams. The Kumbh Mela can carry on. And I mean, what is this messaging, Dr. Parikh? What is this messaging?
Well, Barkha, you wish for vaccine against stupidity, but I believe now stupidity has mutated into evil. Hannah Arendt, famously in 1963, coined the phrase the banality of evil. And I feel now we're dealing with a situation which is far more sinister than just stupidity, because implicit in stupidity is naivety, is lack of intelligence, perhaps lack of awareness. But we have enough reason to be aware. It's almost as though we were living Santayana's words of those who have not learned the lessons of history being condemned to repeat it. If I may, and I'll just do this briefly, I don't see any reason why anybody should be surprised.
Wait. Let's come to you. You're showing us something. Let's come out of this graphic and look at what Dr. Parikh is showing us. Go ahead. Show us what you're showing us. Yeah.
And very quickly. I mean, these are the 3 waves of a pandemic which occurred 100 years ago. The second wave, which was also fueled to an extent by mutant strains, was far more devastating than the first. And the third one too, while not being as severe as the second, was worse than the first. Now, we wrote about this over a year ago. We wrote about this recently in our vaccine book. And forget 100 years ago, maybe public memory is short, excuse me. But in the current pandemic, France is currently locked down for a whole month because of a third wave. Parts of the world have had the fourth wave. Why should we be so surprised by the second wave? And therefore, I don't think ignorance is an excuse that is acceptable. We need to simply correct course, Barkha. And at this point in time, the only major corrective step we can take is to accelerate our vaccination program. We are the largest producer of vaccines in the world. More than half the world gets our vaccines around the year. But if you look at what's happening with vaccines, and if you permit me, I just want to show you a graph again, and you just see how abysmal the situation is. I mean, the country that produces the most vaccines in the world, in terms of percentage of people vaccinated, is right at the bottom over here. You can see that the UK and the US, which made horrendous errors to begin with, corrected themselves, because the UK is almost vaccinated 50% of its eligible population. The US is heading towards 40%. And we who should have known better and who could have done better are the lowest, amongst the lowest in the world in terms of our vaccination. So what can we do today, Barkha? All of us could, talk to cows, come home and bemoan what has gone wrong. But what can we do right? We need to step up vaccination. In my simple policy paper, I wrote that we already had very robust seroprevalence data, which indicated areas in the country where seroprevalence was low and areas where it was near herd immunity levels. And I suggested that in addition to stratification according to age, which is undoubtedly important, it might be appropriate to begin stratification by need, by locations where we were expecting hotspots in the second wave to come. So we need to change policy. We need to vaccinate everybody over 18. The US and UK have got things under control only by vaccination. That's what we need to do right away, Barkha.
Absolutely,
And of course,
but we're not even doing that.
Together.
But we are not even doing that. Now, Professor Pandey, Sumanth, I know you wanted to come in, but Professor Pandey hasn't spoken yet. Go ahead, Sumanth.
1 second
sentence and then
intervention.
Professor. Okay,
One of the
10 seconds.
organizations, one of the organizations I feel that has also failed to speak up, ironically, though their members are maybe doing a fantastic job, is the Indian Medical Association. They are the ones who've got to stand up and say, look, this is unfair on the doctor community, on the healthcare community, on the nurses.
The IMA versus government, they've had many battles. It's become like some politicized larger battle.
Is also split down the middle. It's also split down the middle. You have people who are very strong supporters of the government. I mean, this is a kind of a situation where doctors and paramedics and healthcare workers, nurses are being run into the ground. They are fatigued.
No, I
see my colleagues. I'm a doctor, Barkha, and I see my colleagues who are sick and tired. I don't know honestly how much longer they can go on like this. Just when we thought that they were getting out of this whole thing, this second wave, there are people who are staying in the hospital for weeks on end with no breaks. And this is grossly unfair on them to actually mobilize cases as is being done in the Kumbh Mela.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I tweeted this morning saying that all of this is a huge insult to doctors, to health workers, to people who are risking their lives at the front line, to all frontline workers. And let me tell you, doctors everywhere are tired. That's what we're getting from all of our ground reports. They're without energy. And then when they see this, it is an absolute adding of insult to injury. Professor Pandeji, go ahead.
Actually, I am not as pessimistic as others are on this panel, in the sense that I do not see that we as a nation we are anti-scientific. We are not, because the vaccination has come initially from us only, and we were leading in the program for vaccination. Okay, the fact that we were doing research on vaccination just shows that we are scientific. We do not.
But then how do you explain these election rallies, please. Professor Pandey? ये जो rallies हो रही हैं, ये आप rallies देखिए, इसमें ना कोई election commission रोकता है, ना Supreme Court रोकता है, ना High Court रोकता है, ना politicians खुद रोकते हैं.
Let us compare the others and with us. Okay, हमारी अभी उन्होंने ग्राफ शो कर दिया कि USA में 40% वैक्सीनेशन हो गया और इंडिया में अभी 10% ही वैक्सीनेशन हुआ है. Okay, did he calculate that what is 40% of the 30 crore population of USA?
Yes, and we know in absolute numbers we've crossed well over 100 million, but it's as a percentage of our population, it doesn't protect us, sir.
And what kind of infrastructure facility we have in order to go through the vaccination drive? Do we know that? Do we calculate that?
So fair enough, I'll let Dr. Parikh respond to that. But आप मेरे को जरा इलेक्शन रैलीज, ये कुंभ मेला, ये जो बाकी चीजें होती हैं, उसके बारे में बता दीजिए.
इलेक्शन रैली को कोई जस्टिफाई नहीं कर सकता, कुंभ मेला को कोई जस्टिफाई नहीं कर सकता, बिल्कुल नहीं कर सकता. हाँ, मैं वो जो है, जब तबलीगी जमात पे बात हुई थी उस टाइम में पूरा देश एक तरह से लॉकडाउन में था और वो रियलिटी थी. जब पूरा देश लॉकडाउन में था तो एक पर्टिकुलर एस्पेक्ट था, वो हाईलाइट होता है. अभी पूरा देश
नेशनल लॉकडाउन शायद मुझे अगर याद है तो तब शुरू नहीं हुआ था. इट वाज बिल्डिंग अप टुवर्ड्स दैट.
नहीं
जब ये दिल्ली में रिस्ट्रिक्शंस आ गई थी, वो आपकी बात ठीक है, उनको कोई डिफेंड नहीं करा सर, तबलीगी जमात को कोई डिफेंड नहीं करा. हम सिर्फ डबल स्टैंडर्ड्स क्वेश्चन कर रहे हैं.
मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि डबल स्टैंडर्ड मैं उस तरह से नहीं कह रहा. वहां पे एक कंपैरिजन था. यहाँ पे सब के सब ऑलरेडी जो है वो रिलैक्स मूड में आ चुके. हाँ, अभी जो है ये लगने लगा कि भाई अभी हम 1 महीने 2 महीने पहले की बात करें, दिल्ली में 200 केसेस हो रहे थे, तो रिलैक्स मूड में आ गए थे. रिलैक्स मूड से एकाएक ये जंप हुआ है. हम संभलने में समझने में टाइम लगेगा. अब जगन्नाथपुरी में वो था, जगन्नाथपुरी में जो शो होता है उसके लिए कोर्ट ने भी डिसीजन लिया था कि वहां पे नहीं होना चाहिए, यात्रा नहीं होनी चाहिए. और वो कोर्ट में ही फिर डिफेंड भी हुआ, तो कोर्ट से ही नहीं अलाउ भी किया था कि थोड़े से लेवल पे हम कर लें. हाँ, तो ये चीजें हैं. ये इसको जस्टिफाई हम ऐसे करें कि भाई हम तो सारे एंटी साइंटिफिक हैं, हम तो सारे नहीं मानते हैं. मुझे लगता है कि मोर और लेस the Indian people are scientific, they are law abiding. I'm talking of the majority.
Okay, let's get responses to what you've said. You made two different points. One, you have said that there was a kind of panic. We were moving into a national lockdown in the first quarter of 2020. You can't compare that to 2021 when most of us had thought that we were getting back to our normal lives. दूसरी बात आपने vaccination की कही that Dr. Rajesh Parikh has been too pessimistic. I'll get Sandip to come in, then Dr. Parikh, and then we'll go around the panel for last comments. Sandip, go ahead.
Yeah, two things. Some of this thing, who should be vaccinated, not vaccinated, I think these things should be left to experts. Dr. Parikh is an expert, but none of us should really go in. 2 months ago, Mr. Prashant Bhushan had tweeted that why are we wasting money on vaccination? COVID is disappearing. We should spend that money for doing blah, blah, blah. And today he is again criticizing the government. So I think this is in the domain of experts. And I think our Ministry of Health and AIMS and everybody know what to do under the circumstances. We need to leave it there. Second thing is, I think really speaking, what can we do to change this attitude of people? And that's the, in any management, whether in a small organization to a country, attitude changing is the most difficult task. And this is where people have to get in. Last time it was argued, and I think that's a logical thing, there are two graphs. There is an infection graph and there is a fear graph. The fear graph lags the infection graph. But then when the infection drops, the fear graph still stays. It again, with a lag, it drops. Unfortunately, at that stage, people are saying, how can we do, bajan bhi, jahan bhi, we need to get back. And this was a general reaction. You look at your own profession and journalists. Today, everybody is going, I sometimes worry about a lot of your colleagues who are going into West Bengal with such poor, I'm saying as a Bengali, poor hygiene, poor COVID-appropriate behavior. All these people from your friends from Delhi are camping there for a month. Huge exposure. But that's how things have changed. 1 year ago, you would not have sent them if there was an election. But today, people are saying, okay, life has to come back. But we need to, as a nation, at every level, and that's a very tough task. We have got people at the bottom of the pyramid who behave in a one way. Top of the pyramid, sometimes you might say bottom of the pyramid are far more concerned if we can communicate to them. As we saw last year, even our economy was saved by rural India. If the rural India, something would have happened to that, the economy would have tanked like anything. It's the
No, I agree, but I'll tell you, in rural India, no one wears masks. I have traveled across rural India. कोई नहीं मास्क पहनता. अब पता नहीं, मैं 2 महीने पहले तक या 1 महीने पहले तक, 1 year of the lockdown, I had gone to Bihar. कोई नहीं मास्क पहनता. And then when you see your political leaders address rallies without masks, what is the messaging? That's what I keep coming back to. Our messaging is all confused. We want to enforce a police diktat on individual citizens, but nothing on our netas. I'm going to give Dr. Parikh the last word, so I want to get Shahid and Sumanth first. Shahid, go ahead. Professor Pandey ने एक बात रखी that we are not. Actually, Professor Pandey, अगर आप बीच में कुछ interject करना चाहे, because आपको end में ही मौका मिला बोलने का, and then Shahid can respond to it together.
जी, मैं बस यही कहना चाहता हूँ कि ये जो अभी सिचुएशन ऐसी है कि हम इसको कंपेयर तो कर रहे हैं, लेकिन कंपेयर करने में हम कई चीज़ें छोड़ रहे हैं, कई चीज़ें भूल रहे हैं. जो हमारी सिचुएशन ऐसी है, हम अब जैसे हम ये कह देते हैं इलेक्शन में गैदरिंग नहीं होनी चाहिए. आर वी प्रिपेयर्ड टू कंडक्ट एन इलेक्शन विदाउट गैदरिंग? आर वी मेंटली प्रिपेयर्ड टू? अगर ये मना हो जाए तो क्या गवर्नमेंट पे ज्यादा आप नहीं बरसेंगे, मीडिया नहीं बरसेगी कि भाई ये तो
नहीं, मैं तो ये कहूंगी कि आप एरोप्लेन्स पे कहते हैं, नहीं, मैं आप ही का सवाल का जवाब दे रही हूँ. एरोप्लेन्स पे कहते हैं कि बीच वाले सीट छोड़ दीजिए, तो रैलीज पे भी कर दीजिए. रैलीज पे भी एक कुर्सी छोड़ के मास्क पहनना मैंडेटरी कर दीजिए. जो आप हर जगह करते हैं वो आप रैलीज पे भी करिए. मैं ये नहीं कहती कि जिंदगी वापस नहीं आनी चाहिए. मैं तो बिल्कुल लॉकडाउन के खिलाफ हूँ. मुझे लगता है पैंडेमिक कहीं जाने नहीं वाला है. वी हैव टू लर्न टू लिव विद इट. मेरा अपना राय तो ये है. लेकिन जो रिस्ट्रिक्शंस एक आम आदमी और एक आम औरत पे होती है, वो नेता पे भी होनी चाहिए, और नेता की एक्टिविटीज पे भी होनी चाहिए.
मैं कह रहा हूँ जैसे यूएसए में पूजा होती है, तो इंटरनेट पे भी और पंडित से कनेक्शन कर लेते हैं और वो पूजा करते हैं, और लोग यहाँ पे घर पे ही पूजा कर लेते हैं. तो अगर ऐसा कुछ इंटरनेट बेस्ड हम सिस्टम लाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, इवन फॉर पब्लिक गैदरिंग, सब्स्टिट्यूट फॉर द पब्लिक गैदरिंग और सब्स्टिट्यूट ऑफ कुंभ मेला.
आपकी आवाज उसी समय चली गई, but I think we've got the main gist of what you wanted to say, that the people would not have been very happy of conducting elections in that way. Shahid, go ahead.
Barkha, leadership क्या होती है? Leadership has to lead. Leadership has to show the way. In America, presidential elections were held during the pandemic, and campaigning took place in a very different way. Similarly, here we should have at least tried. And that if the Prime Minister can go suddenly change attitude and go for demonetization and digital, money and everything, why can't he try to change the mode and the attitude during the electioneering? He could have done it. The Election Commission could have done it. Anybody could have, but we don't have the attitude. We have double standards. Let's face the reality. We are hypocrites. Let's face the reality. All of us, including myself. We are ready to condemn the other. We are not ready to look at what we are doing. And the fact remains that month back situation was coming to normal, but vaccination started in January, and we had never bothered to accelerate it. People like me were constantly tweeting that it should be on war footing, vaccination should be on war footing, we should involve the mohalla committees, we should involve the local panchayats and everybody, because it's not a very difficult, this vaccination is not very difficult. Any nurse can do it. You have to just organize it properly. And some of the private sector people had said, people like Azim Premji, that give it to us, we will vaccinate the nation in 3 months. So if we have large population, therefore we should have been more prepared to say that.
No, there's no disagreement. There is no two views that we were too late. We have been too late off the ground on the vaccination. Is pe to koi do raay hai hi nahi, ho hi nahi sakti. Sumanth, quickly, and then Dr. Parikh can take the last one. Vaccines ki kami hai ab. There's a shortage of vaccines. Please, we have been going around vaccination centers. Elderly people are not able to get their second shot as scheduled. Go ahead, Sumanth. Yes.
Yeah, everyone saw this coming for the simple reason that the government did not go in for an aggressive vaccine procurement when they should have started, and they should have started as way back as in November or December. Once the vaccine started, rolling out of production lines, whether it was Pfizer or Moderna, we simply did not. We went into this Atmanirbhar stuff and so on, and that cost valuable time. So one of the very important things is the government should have, and now today we've got the approval for the Sputnik, and phase 3 trial data has still not been published. Phase 3 trial data has not been published for Covaxin. Okay, so my point is we should allow multiple vaccines which have been approved by WHO and most countries to be used in India. Point number one. Point number two, go in for ramping up the vaccination program on a massive way. Get public, get agencies like Polio Plus, Rotary International supported it. Get NGOs, get people involved. This whole thing of everything needs my permission. I can tell you, my state health secretary has been pleading, saying that, look, healthcare workers are not turning up in droves to get the vaccine. And I'm talking about end January, writing a letter, and this was written, a similar letter came from the Punjab government as well, to the union government, saying, please allow us to start vaccinating the senior citizens. 1 month was lost. We had capacities of several 100,000 people a day across the country, and we were using hardly 20% of that. So the plan is, look, the whole thing is, there is a serious disconnect between what the government at the top says and what is actually happening on the ground in terms of the actual implementation.
I think Sandip wants to have one sentence and then Dr. Parikh.
Yeah, just one sentence. I think this criticism we need to hold back because none of us are competent. I would say, it's not a question of who is dispensing the vaccine. It's a question of supply chain. I also live in the same state as Dr. Suman. And in my state, the village next to my house had the vaccine, and that's a humongous achievement in terms of supply chain, I feel. Day one of 1st March, all these places had. So therefore, how much they could ramp up and not ramp up, it's a very, very complex supply chain issue.
No, but we certainly lost a month. If we had just started a month.
But In month of February, Barkha, all of you were fighting, saying we should not start vaccination. Why are we putting the entire
not me.
nation
I
at risk?
actually support compulsory. I support compulsory vaccination. By the way, I'm not a liberal at all on the vaccination program.
So in November, if we started procuring, Doctor, one second, Dr. Sumanth.
Yeah.
There were issues. So I think there is a method being followed. The method may not be given the size and both geographic size, scale, and the population may or may not be there. But I think we need to, instead of flogging the government on those issues, we should flog the government on attitude building, on what they are doing in terms of, overall control, where they can govern, when they talk of governance.
Okay. Sumanth, I really have to go to Rajesh now. So Sumanth, very quickly.
I beg to disagree. One is, I spoke as a medical professional, as a doctor who's worked extensively in public health, and I am still seeing patients on a regular basis right to this day. So I'm speaking from that perspective. The second very important point that I want to make is about the vaccines themselves. State governments want to do things on their own. They have to write letters and get approvals from the center to do every small thing. You remember the same thing happened. First they said, you can't buy PPE kits. We only will have to organize it for you. You can't, the approach from day one has been, everything has to go through us. State governments are literally pleading with the center almost every day, saying, allow us to get more vaccines, at least allow us to use what vaccines we want in the way that we think is best for our citizens of our state. And even today, they can't do that.
We have to start closing. Dr. Parikh, give us a sense of what's happening at Jaslok, the hospital that you're the director of. What is happening there? Do you have remdesivir? Do you have oxygen? Do you have vaccines? Do you have beds? What's going on?
We have over 200 people waitlisted for admission. A lot of them are doctors' relatives. Some of them are our own residents. We ran out of vaccines 2 days ago. But, that apart, Barkha, here is what is ironically tragic. Okay, I am willing to accept that comparing India to the United States is a debatable issue. But how about comparing us to ourselves in the 60s, to the India of the 90s? Not only are we the largest producers of vaccines in the world, we ran two remarkable vaccination campaigns. The smallpox campaign in the 60s, which was phenomenally successful. It eradicated smallpox. We then participated in the 90s polio campaign. And the second one, at least, I participated in. So I know how decentralized it was. And in that campaign, just to give you a quick example, I personally chose to go and vaccinated an area which I felt had a large need. And this is where all the sex workers of Mumbai resided, because I thought their children might get ignored because they were not legitimate children. Some of them were not registered. So I thought that they might get ignored. So we went door to door persuading these women to allow their children to be vaccinated. And when I looked at the data finally, I was appalled because we vaccinated 102% of the eligible population. And I thought there must be a mistake until I then discovered that we had gone to the ST depot in Bombay Central as well and immunized every child who was coming into the city or going out of the city. So, we have no excuse. I mean, I intentionally didn't bring up the example of Israel, which has vaccinated 100% of its population, because that comparison might have been unfair. But the United States is a large country. United Kingdom, not so large, but our vaccination campaigns in the past have been more successful than theirs. Our vaccination production is in excess of theirs. Just restricting to myself to what can be fixed, not going into a blame game, not getting into self-flagellation or, flogging anyone. What can we do today? I think that's more relevant.
Okay, so quickly, what can we do?
Two things, or three things.
What can we do today? Yeah. What can we do?
One, put an end to all these rallies and all these mass gatherings. Two, have a COVID appropriate attitude, not just expect behavior from people, but more important right now is to just step on the vaccination, to vaccinate everybody over 18. We need to move into that right away. Later, as T.S. Eliot said, there will be time. There will be time for us to discuss and analyze and do all of that. But today we need to move, Barkha. And this is just a plaintive request that the voice of science be heard and vaccination be accelerated.
I think you've summed up, those 3 points that none of us, nobody in their right minds can disagree with. Stop the mass congregations, stop the rallies, step on the accelerator on the vaccination program, hear the voice of science, park your other politics and your discussions for afterwards. I can't even imagine that there can be any disagreement, Dr. Parikh. So we'll end on that note and really hope that those who wield power take note of that. Thank you to our panel and thank you to our audience. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place. See you then. Thanks for watching. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.